Well, there were riots in every Afghan city because people didn't want it. And for the first time ever, once that happened, China and Russia carried out joint military maneuvers in that region. Not noticed by the US press, but I cite all the facts in my latest book. So it's not that they don't see what's going on, and do not underestimate China. Pakistan, for instance, is run, or not run, but there are three big lobbies in Pakistan. The American lobby, which is currently running the country, the Saudi lobby, which operates more in a more shifty way through various politicians, and the China lobby, which operates exclusively within the military, makes no proposals on the politics of the country, stays out of the country's internal life. And the Chinese have made it very clear to the Pakistani military, we are not going to tolerate permanent US bases on our border, like the Russians did when they started putting missiles in, threatening to put missiles in Poland, Czechoslovakia.
Hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. So I think the US and its allies are going to find the going difficult if they carry on in this way. Trying to remake the world in their own image when their own world is collapsing. That's the key thing. So it's the crash, the economic crash, combined with the crises in Afghanistan and Iraq, is going to make this a model which no one wants to even look at seriously, including within the European countries.
Let me ask the very last question. Do we see the possibility of an international civil society coming to the fore and playing a role of restraining the empire in the intervening period between now and 25 years, when the world will be a different world and hopefully better regulated? You and I talked that previously.
We saw that, some of that in February 2003, before the U.S. went and attacked Iraq. I'd never seen demonstrations against a war before it ever started. It's always
Never.
after the bombs start falling, then they react. And not only that, but it was global. We saw demonstrations in Osaka, Japan, in Finland, in Lithuania, in Mexico, Nigeria. These are countries that don't have a really close cultural or historical link to Iraq at all. But they were saying, they were serving notice saying, you can't be the rulers of the planet. You can't decide who shall live and who shall die, which country you can attack with impunity and which one you can't. And so they demonstrated out of Iraq, out of regard for Iraq, but also out of regard for themselves. And even among the American people, when they're not sufficiently frightened and reality seeps in a little bit, there really is a reluctance to pursue these far-off wars. You've got to keep frightening them and saying the terrorists going to get you, going to get your mama, going to, you know, they're right under your bed. But they really, many of them are concerned about health care and housing and this whole meltdown that's now taking place. I just had a friend of mine send me an email saying his solution for this thing is don't spend the $700 billion. Let the free market play itself out. He had two solutions. The first was let the free market play itself out, and the second solution involved guillotines. So he didn't. So he didn't go into that one.
I'd like to say I am very pessimistic is the wrong word. I'm very concerned that we are in a period where war is a real possibility. At the same time,
when you say war, we're in 3 wars right now.
No,
2.5.
yes, but not
you mean
wars.
with Russia, something big.
Yes, something much bigger. Because we've had wars pretty constantly. Yes, ever since America summoned up its might and invaded Grenada, we have had, and then Panama. It's been building and building.
But that's who they attack. It's Grenada, Panama. They have never attacked a country that has nuclear powers.
Anyway,
nuclear weapons.
That was a premise to saying that I'm really quite hopeful for the long term is clearly on the side of international comity and civil society because of the infrastructure that we're now getting. The internet allows people to communicate all around the world. Americans are forced otherwise to choose between the Washington Post and the New York Times. They can get on the internet and read the European press, the British press, the Pakistani press. This is a necessary condition for a global society, and it's a huge breakthrough. And of course, there's always the risk that the successors to the neocons will take away freedom of the internet, and we have to watch for that. But the trend in the world is towards a more egalitarian sharing of knowledge and communications, breaking down the monopolies that have been exercised by the major powers. So yes, the answer to your question, despite the risk of war, is we are moving in that direction of an international society.
Well, I hope that international civil society gets its act together, because as has been said, they came out to stop the Iraq war, but when they failed, they went back in again. And that was very demoralizing, the fact that they'd failed. And most people who came out had never participated in any political act before. They were huge, these demonstrations, and they had an impact. I think that in some ways, the most important segment of international civil society are the citizens of the United States of America. I don't want to exaggerate this, but I think in the future does depend on how they develop. And so one has to fight for civil liberties in the United States so people are allowed to express their opinions. We are seeing, as you mentioned earlier, a transformation of this society in terms of who lives here. Their composition, their color, their religions. It's no longer a single society. And these people, over the next 25 to 30 years, especially the kids born in this country, are going to play a role, one hopes, and not be cowed down by the rulers. And that could begin to change the United States itself. You know, the fact that you now have a bridge, a permanent bridge of Latinos who are interested in what's going on back home. They're not like the early immigrants who had no access to news or internet, didn't know what was going on at home. The immigrants who came from Italy in the early years of the last century. These people coming here have links with Mexico, with Venezuela, with Central America. So you had a permanent picket outside the Mexican consulate in LA when they were repressing the citizens of Oaxaca. And that, I think, is a sign of hope. And you have, you know, a sizable minority of American Muslims who live in this country and who play a big role in keeping the hospitals going. You know, play their part as citizens, paying their taxes.
Large number of engineers.
And engineers. And these are people who have to play a role in society. And if they don't, their kids will.
And the empire does have...
Very last words are yours, okay. Go ahead.
Well, the empire does have an Achilles heel, this global empire, which is the manpower. We talked about troop power, if you will. We already talked about that. They're running short of troops, and they're fighting only 2 little wars. I mean, really 2 second-rate wars, and they're having a hard time feeding this global war machine. So there are vulnerabilities in this empire. When looking at its immense abuses and strengths, we should also look at these vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. I think the whole project of the neocons can be summed up with the title of Samuel Huntington's 2 books, The Clash of Civilization, and also his new book, relatively new book, called Who We Are. One is directed towards other countries and civilizations, other is directed towards minorities in this country, particularly Latino minority. And I think partly the future of this country is going to be shaped by the answer majority of people give to Samuel Huntington's 2 challenges. Are we going to be at permanent war with the rest of the world, or are we going to exclude and quarantine and oppress minorities in this country, particularly Latinos who are in the position of becoming majorities in several states? This discussion, friends, will continue in many other settings. Thank you. Thank you, sir.